It's time for a reality check.
We're here to deconstruct health and fitness trends and provide tangible advice so you can become 1% better with each choice starting today. Welcome back to Reality Check. We are your hosts, Jess and Jill. And today we have another special guest. And this is probably going to be the most fun podcast we've had to date, I think. So our special guest, and she's going to give you all the nitty gritty. I don't have much to say to kick her off, but she is human design expert. What do you call yourself, Krystal?
I call myself a specialist. I don't like the word expert so much, but it's fine if you want to call me that.
You sound like an expert. So this is Krystal. I'll make sure all of her social media is in our episode notes for you guys to follow, all of the things. She's got some really cool things coming out for her, other tools for people to utilize, which I'm super excited for myself. But she is a human design specialist. And the way we decided to approach today's episode, because if you've been listening, you probably know enough about Jess and I to know that we are usually a little skeptical of basically anything until we can research it and prove it. And I met Krystal recently at a business retreat, and honestly, I was so impressed and blown away by all of the things that she does. And I did not understand human design at all. We kicked off this weekend and people were like, "Oh, I'm a generator, I'm a this." And I was like, "No hablo. I don't know what these people are talking about." And now I'm just I'm so invested in all of this and I want to learn it all. So we decided to approach this episode by her diving into Jess's human design specifically to break things down. But we just chatted before the episode started, and we also talked about connecting and kind of seeing how Jess and I are, is it not compatibility, how we interact together or putting our charts together, right? So I'll let you explain all of that. But first, give us a background on who you are, what you do, and how you got into this in the first place.
Okay, I'll try to do that in the shortest way possible. So my name is Krystal Woods. I'm a human design specialist. I'm also a speaker and an online entrepreneur. So I got into human design about 6 years ago. I had just kind of branched off on my own and started my business, and it really fell into my lap. I was listening to a podcast one day. They were talking about human design, and I had this really odd visceral reaction in my body as I was listening, even though I had never heard of it before. I remember almost shaking, and I was crying by the end. It was resonating with me so deeply. And it's so funny because I thought I was a projector after that video, and both you and Jess are projectors. I thought I was a projector. And then when I got home and ran my chart, it turns out I am a manifester. And so I kind of just went down this whole rabbit hole. I bought the books, I joined courses, I hired a private mentor. I just wanted to know all of the things. And I knew at that point that the trajectory of my life and certainly my business had changed, because as I started to uncover more of myself, I realized how many layers were kind of piled on, all these layers of conditioning and expectations and societal rules and obligations. And I realized that underneath all of that, there was me. And that I had been conforming and contorting myself to fit these norms for so long that I had almost forgotten who I really was at my core. And so it became this really beautiful journey of unraveling, but also becoming. And I immediately started using that in work with my clients. And I don't know if you know this or not, Jill, but before I got into all of this, I was actually a fitness coach, fitness and wellness coach as well. So when I started learning about human design, it really helped me to get underneath the surface of, women would set these goals and have all these challenges with meeting their goals. And when I started to look at human design, I started to understand what was underneath these patterns of self-sabotage, what was underneath these patterns of low self-worth and low self-esteem, and what was actually causing this at sort of this energetic level. And it allowed me to go so much deeper with them. And so my business just sort of morphed into what it has evolved into today, which is I work mostly with women who are also business owners. And it's that unbecoming and becoming journey. So I really help them to get back in touch with who they are at their core, who they are authentically, what their authentic mission and message is, so that they can really just explode their impact and their influence and feel really purposeful and really aligned in every area of their lives. And human design has been just this absolute life-changing, magical tool to do that, not just for me, but for my clients too.
Yeah, I love that. And I feel like whenever you're in like this like coaching, mentoring space, you're in a position of helping people, right? Like you're a helper and you have to hold so much emotionally and energetically for these people that you're supporting. And that's a lot. And I think that a lot of times in those positions, people do like, people could share the like simplest struggle they're having around like meal prep or scheduling their workouts, but they really just want to feel like seen and validated in their struggle and then obviously supported and strategized with. And I feel like that can be a tough balance, right? Like I feel like sometimes we can get too extreme in either direction. And sometimes it's just like, hey, I hear that you're struggling and that's okay, right? So I think being seen is so impactful in our positions, but really every area of life. Obviously, people want to be like seen, heard, and understood. And I think that's what initially got my attention when we first started talking. One, because I plugged in these stats, right? Which like human design, it's like your place of birth, the time you're born, and the day, right? That's like the three pieces that you need. And as soon as I like plugged this into a chart on Google and handed it to Krystal, she just started saying all of these things. And I was like, wow, I feel so like validated right now. And I think the cool part about it is that you can see like your strengths and your weaknesses and maybe like places that you're falling short and be aware of them and like obviously decide to like work on them or not, or figure out a way to use it to your advantage. And I was like, wow, this is like really cool to understand. So obviously that took me down the rabbit hole. So I'm excited to see how Jess feels about this because I was just so excited.
I have a lot of questions. So I guess my thought, I texted Jill this stuff and I was like, you should ask her this stuff so she doesn't try to read my personality based on the questions that I asked. Because you just said you were going to plug in my birth, all that information that we just talked about into a computer system to pull up a chart. So I had questions about that. Are you reading energy and aura and things like that, like a medium? Or you're like, no, this is a system and we use this system to be able to analyze your personality a little bit and then teach you how to apply your strengths to their greatest potential, that sort of thing? Or is it a combo of both?
Really beautiful question. And I think for me personally, it's a combination of both. And I think what I really resonated with initially was that it felt like this system to be able to actually communicate what I feel and what I sense. And I've always had just a very heightened sense of not just intuition, but perception of others, but never really the words to describe what I knew. And so now I feel like I have this framework and I have this language, and it almost feels like proof to other people when I say, oh, here's your chart. And I'm actually pointing out these different things as if it's like a map. It's like a framework and a language for me to be able to communicate with other people sort of what I sense. And it's really powerful when they can actually see it. And I can point out, here's this center. You don't have consistent, reliable access to this energy and these behaviors. That's why you're so susceptible to influence from others in these specific areas. And we can kind of dig into the more specifics of that. But when I show them that, like you said, Jill, it's like this moment of feeling so seen and so validated and understanding why. It's like, yes, I know that my brain works differently from the person next to me, but why? Why is that? And this kind of gives us this system to understand it and even understand like the impact of our upbringing or the people around us, because we're all impacted so differently. And this gives us an explanation as to why that is. So in short, it really is both. It really is both a system. And a lot of people look at it just as a system. It really depends on the practitioner. There are human design practitioners who are very more sort of kind of colder and more calculated in the way that they read the chart and the way that they communicate what's in the chart. Whereas for me, I do take more of an intuitive approach with people, because to me, when you want to know your human design, it's not really about knowing your human design, right? It's about understanding something about yourself. And there's usually a reason why you want that. And so my approach is more like, what is the why? And how do we use the chart to help you understand that why, receive the clarity so that you can actually move forward? And like you said, Jill, make your uniqueness work for you instead of keep trying to stuff yourself into the box of the norm, you know?
Mm-hmm. I love that. And, what's funny is my husband, who is like law enforcement, straight and narrow, black and white thinking, did a whole hour-long consult with Krystal and was like wanting to just understand all of this better, which was so fun for me to see. But it's funny, a lot of like the things that he reads now about himself say like, he wants to like, he would thrive to like entertain people and work like community and friendships around him. And he's like, I don't think this is mine. This isn't right. And I'm like, dude, you don't get it. Like that is what you need, but you have like something has shifted for you and you have to like reconnect back to that. Like that's the thing that's making you thrive and you're just not there right now. And that's okay. So it is cool to see, like you said, with like upbringing, conditioning, social, whatever pressure, how things change. But we did just before we hopped on this, give Krystal, Jess's information, and then she already had my information from looking at things previously, but she plugged mine in again and then did like her connection thing. So I don't know, Jess, do you have other questions before she like dives into all of this or?
No, I guess like the ultimate purpose of what you do is like helping people. Because I kind of asked Jill, like, okay, cool. Like this is very interesting, but how does it apply to what we do and what we teach people? And the way she explained it to me is like, this is like professional and personal growth. Like how can we optimize our strengths? How can we overcome challenges and be aware of our roadblocks so that we can do a better job navigating helping more people. So I think that that's pretty interesting. And then the skeptic in me is like, okay, like, does it matter? Is what you're about to tell me having to do with if I'm over caffeinated right now, if I'm like having a bad day, if I'm really having a chill day?
Overthinks everything.
Does it have anything to do with like my personal, like my right now vibe, or it's
state
just
of
like
mind right now?
Nope, it is based on your birthday, your birthplace, and your birth time. And I don't know if that made sense the way I asked that, but
yeah, what I'm hearing is that you're asking me, do these environmental factors affect your human design? And they absolutely do. But what your chart tells us is how these environmental factors will affect you personally compared to someone else. Right. And so when you say like over caffeinated, I'm like, of course you're over caffeinated. You're a projector. So you don't have consistent, reliable access to physical life force energy to produce, to work, to do, to build. Right. So for you,
we don't have to stop caffeinating. We're good.
So really like one of the signature things of a projector is like, no, yeah, just give me more coffee and I'll do it. I can get through it. Just give me more coffee and I can get through it, because some days you can get into a flow and it feels like you are filled with this energy and you can produce so much and you can, whether it's writing or I'm not sure what your zone of genius is. I haven't even looked at your chart yet, but whatever your zone of genius is, it's like you can get into this flow and keep going, but that's not consistent. Like you're just not sure when those moments are going to come. So what about the other moments when there is work to be done, right? So yeah, you're going to use things like caffeine or whatever tools that you have to give you that burst of energy so that you can get through that. But not everyone's designed that way. There are some people who wake up and they have this full battery, like Jill's husband. He's got a full battery every morning and his job
Brett and Anthony have like systems, routines every day. They're consistent is how I describe them.
He could have 104 fever consistent. And he is still going to do 100 push-ups when he wakes up. And I'm like, you suck.
It's interesting you say that because I find that that's actually one of the things I quite enjoy about doing online fitness coaching and working for Jill, because it's like, okay, here's the things that need to get done within a week. And I'm able to optimize when I'm at my best versus other times where I need to recharge. And it's okay because I can still get my work done versus when I used to be in a corporate job and I was like wanting to bang my head against the wall half of the week.
Oh, yeah. Anybody who is a projector, manifester, or reflector, By the way, anyone who is listening and is like, what the F is human design? How do I do this? So if we could drop a link in the show notes to have them pull up their chart, that way, pull up your chart before you continue listening, and you can kind of follow along. But projectors, manifestors, and reflectors, we're the minority. We make up collectively about 30% of the population. And the signature for us is that we don't have that consistent life force energy, that consistent physical energy. So 30% of the population literally is not designed to be in a 9-to-5 corporate job. Like, we just don't have the consistent energy. And so I think a lot of people that I work with, when I say that to them, because even entrepreneurs, a lot of women that I work with came from corporate, started their own business, and basically created another corporate job for themselves. And so, I can tell them, no, maybe you want to structure your week a little bit differently. And it's like, I can see the relief in their body when I say, you don't have to force yourself to be so consistent in the way that we understand consistency in our society, if that makes sense. So yeah. I'm excited to dive in now to this.
Yeah, let's do it.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
Sorry, I have so many questions. Can you give us some sort of background on like the system of human design? Like, it's based on astrology, a person made it up at some point. Like, how did this, tell me more about the concept.
So your skepticism is just gonna just skyrocket right now. So basically what happened is, this man, his name was Alan, but he was tripping on acid one day, and he started to basically channel this information from what he calls the voice. And it lasted for 8 days and nights. And he channeled all this information about the universe. And then from that point on, this was in the 80s, from that point on, he made it his life's work to build upon this system and share it with the world. And it incorporates ancient wisdom like the Chinese I Ching. A lot of human design is based on this ancient oracle Chinese text called the I Ching, or the Book of Changes. And the I Ching is actually, it corresponds to the 64 codons, like in our DNA. So it's actually very fascinating. But also astrology, Western astrology, as we know it here in the States, as well as the Kabbalah tree of life, and the Hindu Brahmin chakra system. So you look at the chart and you see these 9 centers. They are loosely based off of the 7 chakras, but we have 2 more centers in human design, so they are a bit different. So he basically took all these systems, as well as it's also, there is actual science that is incorporated into this. So basically the theory is that at the time of your birth, the planets were aligned in a certain way. And there are these teeny, teeny, tiny little things called neutrinos that are constantly passing through space, through everything in space. They're smaller than atoms. And so those neutrinos actually carry mass or information. So at the time of your birth, these neutrinos are passing through the planets at certain points, and as well as your body at that same exact time. And so it creates this imprint of energy that influences our behavior. So I know I just nerded out, and that's kind of a lot, but
I love this stuff. No, that's very helpful.
Yeah. So
I think
really
you're wrong.
is.
I think that lowered her guard a little bit, actually.
Yeah. So
yeah,
go ahead.
So you can study these different aspects of human design and see how they all fit together. Most people, if you go on Instagram and you're reading about human design, or even some of these apps, most people don't care about that stuff. They're just tell me about myself, right? Tell me what this means about me. But of course, in my profile, I'm a 1-3 profile, and Jess, you of course are a 1-4 profile. So I'm going to talk about this more, but the 1 in your profile is called the investigator or the researcher. And you're very, very deeply curious. And so when you are intrigued by something, you feel like you need to go all the way down that rabbit hole. And the reason for that is that the more information the more you have, the more secure you feel inside about that, and the more prepared you feel, and the stronger you feel. So the information for you is power. So getting your questions answered is actually what makes you feel more at ease. And I am that way too. So that is part of why I just I wanted to know all the things. I was like, tell me about the neutrinos. Tell me about how mass is actually moving through absolutely everything around us all the time and carrying this information that is actually influencing the way that I think and the way that I move through the world and the way that other people actually receive my energy, So yeah, if you love to nerd out, I got your back.
Is Alan the law of one guy, the guy who talked to Ra? Is that the same as the collective?
Yeah, so he ended up changing his name to Ra Uruhu. So he was born Alan Krakauer or something in Canada, and then decided to go to Spain and trip on acid and receive all this information. And from then, he literally changed his name and made it his entire life's work to build on this system, share this system, and of course, monetize and commodify the system as well. I look at your chart first, Jess, since you know nothing. And then I would love to kind of talk about your connections, because I bet that a lot of people in your community and a lot of your listeners, if they've been listening to you for a while, I'm going to say things and they're just going to laugh and be like, oh my gosh, yes, that's
I can't wait.
Yeah. So, okay, so Jess, you are a 1/4 self-projected projector. So this is pretty rare. I'll just say that right off the bat. Most people are, 70% of the population are generators or manifesting generators. 20% of the population are projectors, and self-projected projectors are even more rare. So what makes you a projector is that you don't have that sacral energy that I was talking about, that life force energy that is consistent and reliable. So right off the bat, we know that you don't have access to this physical energy. And so we're kind of like, well, why is that? And that's because you are meant to be more of a guide than a doer, than a worker, than a builder. You're here to really be able to see deeply into other people. You are the seer. So you can see straight to the heart of someone. You can see straight to the heart of a situation. You have a gift for being able to see and sense where the energy is going. So you said you're married. Yeah.
Yes.
And you were saying he has very consistent energy. So you probably have this gift, which I already know that Jill does. And that's probably why she booked a session for her husband with me. You have this gift of being able to see where your husband's energy is going. What is a yes for him? What is a no for him? What's the right direction for him? And you have this ability for everyone. It's probably what makes you a really excellent coach as well, because you're able to see what someone's challenges are underneath what they think their challenges are, right? So they think that their problem is this, but you understand what the problem actually is, and you understand how to basically eradicate that problem. You know exactly the way forward. The thing about projectors, though, is that, and you'll see, if you run your chart, it'll say projector and strategy to wait for the invitation. This is based on, all these types are based on your aura. So depending on which centers you have colored in, or what we say in human design is defined, this is your consistent, reliable energy. So where that is for you determines your aura, your electromagnetic field. So actually how your electromagnetic field operates and moves through the world. And your aura as a projector is like a laser. So it just penetrates straight through the aura of another person, straight to the heart of who they are and where their energy is in the moment. And it's a really beautiful ability, but your strategy is to wait for the invitation, because most people are not going to be ready to receive the information that you have, right? So one very typical thing for projectors is giving unsolicited advice, because you're like, people will be complaining, right? Maybe your client is complaining. And this is, I guess, not a good example because your client has invited you to share your insights and your guidance with them. But maybe it's just a friend, and your friend is going through something and she's telling you about it and complaining, and you are about to burst because you understand where your friend needs to go and what your friend needs to do to eradicate this problem. You're just like, you can see it so clearly. Well, when you just go ahead and tell your friend, if your friend is not in a space to receive that, she is going to kind of be irritated. She's not going to receive it, and she's not going to take your advice. And then because you don't have this consistent access to energy, and that requires energy for you to actually guide her, you've now essentially wasted precious energy on this person who wasn't ready to receive it. And you then feel bitter and resentful because you're like, girl, I just gave you the best advice of your entire life. And not only are you not going to take my advice, but you're going to be irritated with me? No. Right? So
Jill, stop laughing.
I'm going to cry of laughter.
Jill's cracking up.
Oh
So
my gosh, wow.
wait for the invitation is just like, and a lot of I'll say this right now. So many projectors get this just flat out wrong. And they're like, oh, I have to wait for someone to tell me that they want my insights. No, the invitation is not necessarily something so tangible or something that you can see, feel, hear, taste, touch. The invitation really is like this kind of call that comes from within. You can't really like explain it, but there's a difference between feeling this pressure and urgency to give your advice that almost can come from this very sneaky ego place, right? It's like, yes, you care. Yes, you want to help. And it's also serving you because you feel like you are giving value and you want some sort of validation for that. There's that. And then there's on the flip side of that, there's you just knowing, you have a knowing, and you feel that the person that is talking to you is ready. And you feel that they are fully ready to receive it. And in that instance, I always advise my clients, I'm like, just say, hey, I think I have some insight that could help you. Are you open to receiving that right now? Or do you just feel like you need to vent? Right? And from there, they can respond to that. And then and once they're ready and they're ready and they know they're ready and you give them that guidance, it doesn't deplete you. It actually gives you more energy and it makes you feel appreciated because they're ready to receive it and they do appreciate you and they'll say that. So that's
helpful in terms of hearing that, like when you read that word, like invitation about projectors, it's like, well, what does that actually mean? So that was super helpful to hear too. Cause I feel like that
we have like a safe word. Like my husband will tell me, okay, I just need to vent right now. I don't need to problem solve. Like we have a communication system set up because it is so in my nature to try to fix.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And I think that's great. And that's actually usually one of the things that I will advise my clients on and be like, and it's so interesting too, because, and really any time that we're talking about human design and these different things, it's like the smallest tweaks. And that seems so simple when you say them out loud, but when you actually implement them, you're like, wow, this just removes so much resistance. It removes so much resistance from the relationship and from the dynamic between you because you understand and you see and validate the other person and vice versa, and that you're different and that you're in different places. And so when you can actually feel that it's like a sensation in your body, the invitation, it's just a knowing that it's time. Yes, this is the right room. Yes, this is the right time. Yes, this is the right person. And the more you really follow that and trust that, first of all, the less you're going to talk, which projectors, especially self-projected projectors, like you are just chatty Cathys. Like you just want to talk, which is great. And also, if it's not the right time, place, audience, you will just totally deplete yourself. You will just totally exhaust yourself. And then you're like, oh my God, I'm peopled out and I can't like talk to another human being for 2 weeks. So it's really about like preserving that energy and really using it in the way that you're designed to use it. And for the people that you are actually designed to help, that actually can see and appreciate you. And not everyone's going to be able to do that. And a lot of projectors get so caught in this loop of trying to be seen, trying to be validated, trying to prove that they deserve to be appreciated. When you can just close your mouth and see yourself and appreciate your own insights and your own guidance, you will naturally attract people and opportunities that deeply see you, because when you do speak, your words and your energy hold so much more power because you've preserved that energy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, spot
That's
on.
so good. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really good. And honestly, I feel like that aligns with like projectors in general, right? Like I feel like it's like you have to like prove yourself. And when I started to understand that, I was like, wow, this makes so much sense. We have a joke actually on our coach meetings that Jess has to stay on mute until it's her turn.
We should have done it for this podcast recording, actually.
Or like stay on mute and I will call on you when it's your turn.
I love that.
Can't help herself, and it's okay.
Yeah, no, and
fun,
like I said, you're also a 1-4 profile. So the curiosity in you, that's a little bit different because you're just like, I want my questions answered. I need to know. I got to know the things. And that gives you energy too. Like information gives you energy. It sort of lights you up. And so, and that might not be for every projector, but I would say it certainly is for you. And for you specifically, your most consistent, reliable energy, especially in your personality, actually has to do with storytelling and using your voice in a way that you probably are a person that everyone wants to tell their life story to. And it's probably like pretty immediate. Like you meet someone and then they're like, oh my God, I've never told anyone this before, but, and they just kind of blah, 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 blah. And you hold on to these stories. And the way that your mind, your brain works is that it's not just about this one person's personal story. What you're able to do is see how that story actually relates collectively, relates sort of universally. And you can almost like distill these themes down into a story or an idea or a concept that can relate to everyone, that can help everyone. And you are a person who is very driven by sharing in order to help the greater good. Like you are very motivated by taking what you know, taking what you are exceptional at, and using it in a way that helps everybody improve their lives. And so, whereas for me, I don't have much of that collective energy of like sharing and focus on the bigger picture, the greater good. I'm really more of, let me help this individual, because when I help the individual, there's a ripple effect that inevitably will reach out into their communities and kind of move out into the greater world. But I'm not so concerned with the greater good first. Whereas you really are a person who is constantly being like, okay, well, I'm hearing this story, or I'm seeing this issue, or whatever it is, and you're applying it to the bigger picture. Okay, well, how do I apply this to all of our clients, right? How do I apply this to the whole system that we're using so that we can make it better for everybody? Like that's immediately where your brain goes. You also are a person who you can very much get caught in loops. You have a really strong mind, and you're designed to actually use your mind for others to help them overcome obstacles. So you have the channel of abstraction. And so any human design nerds listening right now. So for you, you have the most consistent energy and behavior that's available to you is in your mind. So these thoughts that you think and the opinions that you hold and the things that you just know, like you could potentially be a little bit of a know-it-all. I don't mean that negatively necessarily, but
no, it's okay. I'll take it.
Yeah.
I can own the bad with the good.
I mean, being a know-it-all is not always a bad thing, as long as, you can be a good listener as well. And I think you definitely have the potential to be a wonderful listener too. But your mind is so strong. And what I see a lot with people who have this channel is that they can sort of internalize this mental process where they're like, constantly seeing obstacles and constantly trying to overcome obstacles for themselves. And it really is, that's not the purpose of this. Really, it's meant for you to use it for others. Your mind is for others. Your mind is best used to help other people overcome their obstacles. Anytime you try to use your mind for your own life and see your own obstacles and fix whatever needs fixing, you can have a tendency to dip sort of in the shadow of this energy, of this behavior, which is mental anxiety and intense mental pressure and sort of like these ruminating thoughts that can just go like over and over and over and over. Again, the one in your profile has a tendency to hyperfixate as well. So you can just become like hyper fixated on issues or obstacles and go around and around and around so much that it like, there's no way out. And so the best thing for you to do is to, anytime you're feeling like you can't help yourself, help someone else, because that's the best use of your mind, is being able to guide other people to overcome their own obstacles and being able to apply that process that you're guiding them through, be able to apply that process in a bigger picture way. So not just for this one individual, but for like all of your clients collectively, for instance. How's that resonating?
There's a lot of accuracy to it, to the ruminating thoughts, to the like, yeah, I'll get stuck in loops and like, how do I get out of this loop all the time? Like that is so spot on. I think the helping others thing, like I see myself as, I've always wanted to help people. And like that has led me into this career that I'm in now. But I also do get quite exhausted from helping people sometimes, where then so some of that, when you're saying like use it to channel it to give people, like it'll give you energy helping other people. I think that sometimes I steer away from that. But I'm sure it's to my own demise if I'm staying in my own loops in my head. But
I mean, I think that what's most important for projectors, like first and foremost, like if I'm working with a new client who's a projector, the first thing that we're doing is developing an intimate relationship with your personal energy. So understanding when are the times when you are helping others that it does give you life, and how do you set boundaries? Another thing about projectors is that you don't come into the world understanding boundaries. You are just like, it doesn't compute. Like, what is a boundary? And so this is why a lot of projectors end up getting into these burnout cycles. There's actually a term in the human design community called projector burnout that usually happens around late 30s, early 40s, where women are, especially women, they become workaholics and overgivers and get stuck in these cycles, because what happens is, because you don't have this consistent physical life force energy, but most of the people around you do, you observe the way that other people operate. And because you're a projector, you observe to like the nth degree. And so you're observing everyone else going about their business in a very consistent, reliable way. And you are like, and you also have an undefined heart center as well. So you're under pressure to prove yourself. You're under pressure to be productive. You're under pressure to keep up with the workload. You're under pressure to, and so what can end up happening is you totally overcompensate for that. And you absorb this energy from other people. So when you're in a room full of people, you're just like, oh my God, like you just have all this energy. We were joking at the retreat, Jill, and there were a few projectors and manifestors at the retreat. And we were the ones that were staying up the latest every night because we're like buzzed off of everybody's energy. And so you can get carried away. And if you haven't developed a relationship with your own personal energy, you can't tell the difference between what is actually yours versus what is someone else's. And so you will just go until you literally cannot anymore and you crash and burn. So you want to really develop that relationship with your energy. And like some practical ways to do this are, first of all, making sure that you have ample time alone. As a 1/4 as well, yes, your gifts are they're really useful for the collective, but at the same time, you are a person who is very introspective and you require a lot of time like in your own bubble, in your own sort of like world, so that you can process all of the information that's coming to you all the time. Like you're absorbing information at rapid speeds all the time. So for you, it's like you need to make sure that you have time to process that, time and space away from everyone else. So making sure that you kind of have a sanctuary. Another thing that's really helpful, and the way that you do this is going to be different from the way that Jill does this, because Jill's energy is very much like in her physical body. Jill has more consistent physical energy and probably is like more of a busybody than you are. And so Jill is the one who's going to maybe gravitate more towards like higher intensity workouts in order to like move energy through. Whereas for you, you might want to take a gentler approach, lower intensity, but either way, doing practices that help you to move the energy that you have been absorbing from everyone around you. So that might be as simple as like taking a bath and imagining that energy going down the drain, or taking a walk in nature and allowing like that energy to go back down into the earth. Practices that really help you ground and come back to your center and release everything that you have taken in from everyone around you. And when you do this consistently and you really observe with intention, you'll be able to see, especially, menstruating women, being able to connect also with your own personal cycle will help you to understand a lot of like, okay, well, this week I'm probably going to have more energy to be social. And next week I'm literally not going to want to talk to another human and I'm not going to want to move. So whatever factors that you find are consistently affecting your energy and the way that you are able to show up is going to bring you so much value, because you'll know like, okay, this week is the week that I'm sharing all of this information that I've been processing for the last 3 weeks, right? So you hold it and you hold it and you hold it and you let it sink in and you let it marinate and you go around in your mind about it. And then eventually you're ready to like open up and share it and actually, guide other people with it. So I would say, yes, you are designed to help others with your mental process and your special gift of solving these problems and helping people overcome obstacles. And also, it's important that you learn how to set boundaries around your own time and your own energy so that you don't get caught in a burnout cycle with that.
So, Jess and I joke that we have an unhinged week every month where we just can't control ourselves and we feed off of each other's energy, which we'll catch ourselves and be like, oh, I think it's happening. We should shelf this until the next week because we're just feeling each other's fires.
Yeah,
it's
because
so funny to say, like with your cycle, because we very much like communicate differently to each other at different points in our cycle.
yes. And consistently, Jill, you're influencing Jess with your, we talked about this before, but your root center, that's where adrenaline and stress and urgency and time is all there in the root center. And for you, it's like very consistent, like go, go, go. We got to get it done. We got, and Jess is more like mental pressure. So like, Jess's presence is putting pressure on you to figure things out and answer questions. And like around her, you're just like, oh my God, there's just like so much information up here. Whereas when you're around Jess, like she's like, oh, I gotta like do stuff. I gotta like move faster. And so there's kind of like this pressure at play. And another thing too, I could see where you have this interesting connection that I see a lot of codependent dynamics come from, which is that, Jill, you have this very consistent and reliable access to these, your instincts for survival and for safety and for well-being. Like you just naturally know what's good for you. You naturally know like what to eat in order to feel good, when to sleep, like that comes really naturally for you, whereas it really doesn't for Jess. And probably, Jess, it's been really a journey for you over time getting to know like, okay, these are the foods that are right for me. These are the routines that are right for me. But when you're around someone like Jill, who does have this consistent energy, I'm talking about the splenic center for anyone curious. When you are around someone who does have this consistent energy in the spleen, this consistent like sense of well-being in their body, you feel that, right? So when you're around a healthy person, it's like that feels so good for you. It feels like you feel healthy and full of vitality yourself. And so for some people who are not as in touch with their bodies and are not as in touch with what's good for them, when they're around someone who is, they can really latch on and really just almost become addicted to that energy because they derive all of their sense of well-being and health and vitality from being around that person. So a lot of codependent or even abusive, I'm not saying you guys are codependent or abusive, but like a lot of codependent or abusive patterns can come from this space because you have one person who's deriving their complete sense of well-being from another. And so when that person's not around, they're just like, oh my God, I feel like I'm dying, you know? So that's an interesting dynamic between the two of you as well. Yeah. Okay. I want to pause because I'm going a mile a minute. That's just how I am. But I want to see like what, questions, and is there anything specific you want to dive into?
So I was just going to comment on what you shared about like her mind and my like go pressure. I can see where that could go wrong, but I think we are both the way that we use that so well to our advantage in our dynamic, whether it's personally or professionally. We both are so great at like, I can't today, like way too much. Jess will be like, absolutely not. I'm not discussing this with you until like 2026. I'm not attending. I'm not going. I can't give that to you. Sometimes I keep asking until she breaks. No, I'm just kidding. But I think we're very, do. Yeah. But we're very open in that communication. I'll be like, dude, I can't today. Like, or I need your help with this if you want me to do it, or whatever it is, like it could be the silliest thing. But I feel like we have very open lines of communication in that regard. And we know about each other that if there's a lack of communication, we know immediately there's a reason why. And I feel like we can detect when the other person needs space or the other person needs a little bit of support. But then we also can say like, all right, fine, I need to like back off or whatever it is, So I feel like that helps prevent that from being an issue. In my eyes. Jess is probably like, fuck you, I hate you, even though
No, I agree. And we're equally direct. So it's helpful because it's like we aren't really scared to hurt each other's feelings because we know it's coming from
because we know that I know that if you say I'm not doing this, my feelings aren't hurt. I respect it because I know Jess has a valid, she has a reason for whatever she's saying.
I love that. That's amazing. And I will say too that a lot of the women that I work with have reached a point where they're very much just naturally kind of like living the highest expression of their design. And I would say, because there are patterns, and the way that I approach it really is like there's sort of a darker or lower vibrational side. And that's really when you're operating out of a space of fear and, need to conform or whatever, versus a space of really being secure within yourself. And security is a huge theme for you, specifically, Jess, because, and let me see, Jill, you're 4'6". So security is definitely a major theme for you, Jess, like really feeling like, okay, I need to have like this very secure foundation. And if you understand like what is required for you in order to feel secure, then you're able to kind of come out of those fear responses and expand a little bit more and be able to, like you said, be direct. You both have an undefined emotional solar plexus center. And this is the center where physiologically, this is where the nervous system is. But energetically, this is where your emotions, your desire, your passion all lies. And so when you have an undefined emotional solar plexus, it's just like, you can almost feel like overcome by other people's emotions. You are the classic empath. And I see this manifest in two different ways. And anytime we have an undefined center, it's usually expressed in one extreme or the other. And the extremes for this one are either you become very overwhelmed by other people's emotions and you totally shut it down. Jill and I talked about this.
We are too. I can already tell you we're both at opposite ends of these extremes.
Yeah. So like you will just like completely shut down and you're just like, I'm not like, no, like and it's almost like you can't even begin to feel emotionally, right? And then the opposite end of that spectrum that I see is you're just off the cuff with your emotions. You just wear your heart on your sleeve. You are very sensitive, and someone walks in the room and they're angry and you're like, oh my God, like, and you can kind of internalize it sometimes as like, oh, it's my fault or whatever. And what ends up happening a lot of the time is people with this will get stuck in this pattern of avoiding conflict. And it's like, you can feel like this internal conflict all the time. Like you will almost blame yourself for everyone else's emotions because you don't have the distinction between your own emotional world and someone else's. So you end up feeling like it's your fault or whatever. And then you avoid confrontation because you're afraid of their reaction. And it's understandable because when someone has an emotional response to something that you have said, you're going to feel their emotional response magnified. So it's like, let me just not even have that conversation because I just don't want to deal. And a lot of people with the undefined emotional solar plexus will just do everything in their power to avoid any sort of conflict, any sort of confrontation, and basically just can also fall into patterns of avoiding their own truth for that reason. And so a lot of people pleasing tendencies can come from that space as well. But yeah, I don't know. So it seems like, Jill, you're saying that Jess falls more on the spectrum of like wearing
everything you just described. However, I don't feel like she
Not
avoids
conflict
confrontation.
avoidant.
I don't think she avoids that. However, I think she avoids that by proactively addressing the situation so that there isn't later a conflict. So she'll stew and be emotional and she's like, oh my God, there's a problem. I have to get to this now. She won't sleep. She won't eat. She won't do anything. And then it's resolved, right? So that there isn't an actual conflict. So I think that's how I perceived it for Jess.
That 1,000%. Yep.
That's interesting you say that because you actually have this gate called conflict or conflict resolution. And it has to do with intimacy. And basically, like the way to access the sort of higher expression of this is to completely just avoid conflict altogether by being so open and honest that there's no hidden agenda. There's no.
That is me.
You're just like, let's lay it all out on the table right now so that we can completely avoid conflict altogether. So again, it just seems like you naturally have accessed and embodied sort of a higher frequency of this energy, which is beautiful, which is great.
So how do you overcome the people pleasing aspect of that? Of worrying that somebody's mad at me or do they like me or whatever? Like that is a downfall, not a thing that you thrive in. So how do you get out of that?
So I think that it's going to look different for different people for sure. But one way that human design is really helpful is that I think that the first layer of understanding human design is like, okay, how do I understand myself more? What makes me different? But then the next step is understanding others more. So it's like, okay, looking at your husband's chart and being like, oh, so he just has these tendencies that have nothing to do with me. Like, oh, he's actually a different person. He has different thoughts in his head. He has different ways of operating that have absolutely nothing to do with me. And when you can see that person for who they are and not your own projection of who they are, that is super helpful in itself. The next
step,
not
so much changing something for herself. It's just kind of taking a step back and understanding maybe the person she's having an interaction with better.
I would say that's one really important aspect. And then another is very similar to what I was saying before of like giving yourself the time and the space away from other people. It's the same thing with the emotions. It's like connecting with your own emotions, connecting with your own inner landscape and your own, we feel emotions in the body as sensations and your nervous system. So it's like really regulating your own nervous system. And then when you have an interaction with someone else who's not regulated, you yourself can see the separation. You can see the separation between your emotions and their emotions. And when you start to kind of get up here, you're like, wait a second, what's going on with them? Right? So like your partner comes home and all of a sudden you yourself are angry. You are like, wait a minute, I was fine 5 minutes ago. And you can look at your partner and be like, hey, what's up? You want to talk about it? And kind of like, I'm not saying that it's not going to be uncomfortable still, because I think when you're an empath, I don't necessarily think you can avoid feeling other people's emotions. That's not really the point. It's more so like, can you discern yours from theirs? Can you make it not about you? And actually just ask them, hey, what's up? Do you want to talk about it? What do you need right now? You know? And I think like, this is sort of, I'm kind of going off on a little tangent right now, but when you become this aware, it's almost like you have this responsibility to be the adult, and which I personally feel resentful about it sometimes, because I'm like, can you just like take responsibility for your own freaking emotions, you know? But a lot of times people don't have that awareness. So it's like you having that awareness and being like, hey, it really feels like something's going on. So what do you need? And asking them to check in with themselves so that you can support them, you know? But I would say like those are two of the biggest ones. And also like really learning how to have productive conflict, productive confrontation, productive conversations that can completely eradicate the need for conflict or confrontation by being super open and honest and not being afraid to actually speak your truth, and being able to do that in a way that has nothing really to do with the other person and everything to do with your own truth. So yeah, it's a journey. I would say it's not something that happens overnight for a lot of people, especially women. We are conditioned to be people pleasers. So it's a journey.
It's interesting when you say like you feel feel a little bit resentful around like maybe someone else who isn't as in tune with their emotions or as like evolved. I don't know if that's the right word, but I feel like for me, and I don't know if this is just me and my own evolution or personality based or whatever, but I feel like when I understood myself better, like I actually was able to detach more, because I feel like I did stress a little more, maybe like in Jess's manners of like, are they mad? Did I hurt their feelings? Did I cross the line? And I don't know. I got to a point of like, I don't want to say it's that I don't care, because obviously I care. I don't want to hurt people, but I've gotten to a point that I'm like, this is me and this is what I deliver and this is what I bring to the table. And if that's not for you, I don't lose sleep at night. Like I'm okay. I don't fear that conflict, I guess. I don't know if conflict is the right word, or confrontation or whatever it is, but I guess I don't feel that as much. But we're both projecting.
You just have security in like, okay, this is who I am, and I'm going to attract the right type of people.
Yeah, but I definitely don't think that was like always the case either. I was curious to hear your perspective on the confrontation thing. So I was like, I could see immediately you're like, I don't avoid confrontation, but I was like, wait, you do though. It's just
I don't like it, but I rip the Band-Aid off.
You're proactive so that it doesn't get to a point of confrontation, a blow up, whatever, because you get ahead of it, which I thought was actually, when I heard that, at first I was like, she doesn't avoid conflict. I'm like, wait, she actually kind of does if you look at the way that you approach things. So I think that was funny.
Yeah. And it's also of note that you both have a 4 in your profile, and like your profile, I keep mentioning it, but it's basically, I read once it described as it's the role you play in the movie of your life. It's sort of like this archetype that you embody. And the 4 archetype is very concerned with relationships. The 4 is like the relationship builder. Relationships are very important to you. And for Jill, it's more like in your personality. You consciously put a lot of focus into the people and the relationships around you. Like you love, you have a person for everything. Someone's like, oh, I need to paint my house. And you're like, oh, I have a person for that. I can help you. Right. And for you, Jess, it's more like actually unconscious or in your body, but you do have this need, as introspective as you are, and as much as you love to be alone, you do have this need, like this almost impulse to connect with others that you might not even be super aware of. But the fact that you both have this tendency, I find it really beautiful, because 4 profiles are looking for like soulmate bonds. And I don't just mean that romantically. I mean that with friendships. I mean that with work relationships, everything. You're like, I have no tolerance for anything that's surface level. Like You are like, I'm not surface level conversation, small talk, like none of that. And what I see happen to a lot with fours is that you can end up being almost like jaded when it comes to other people and relationships, because people can just really fall short of your expectations, because you understand what it takes to be in relationship with someone. You understand reciprocity in a way that other people do not. You understand, consideration and thoughtfulness and, not being so self-absorbed. Even though you can have some of those tendencies, you understand what it takes to be in a healthy relationship with another person. And it's part of your purpose to really like live that and be a living example of that. Not everyone is wired that way. Not everyone is wired to understand that. And so what can happen is people will fall short of your expectations. People will take advantage of you. People will, just really show up in ways that you're like, this isn't the way that this is supposed to go. And what I see sometimes is that fours will just really kind of shut down from relationships and become very jaded when it comes to other people. And what's important to understand about that is that when you are really being yourself and you're holding your boundaries and you are speaking your truth, you will attract the exact correct people for you. And those bonds that you create have the potential to just be like so soul deep. It's like these soul connections. So I find it really beautiful that you both have the four, and it seems like you do have that kind of connection with each other. I'm just meeting you now, Jess, but just seeming from the way that you interact and the way that your energy feels together, it seems like you have that kind of bond that's just like, I'm not going anywhere.
We always joke about Meredith and Christina from Grey's Anatomy. We always joke that like, actually our husbands joke that like we are soulmates and they're just like our like live-in person. Like my husband jokes that like you and Jess would be fine forever.
I love that. I love that.
And there's
I genuinely think there is like a different soul, like you have obviously your romantic soulmate, but I do think that you can have a friendship soulmate, and it's different obviously, but I was like, wow, you actually can have more than one person in your life, and it's interesting.
I think for us, there's very much truth to us both being skeptical and lacking trust in people, and it being weird that we trust each other so much in both directions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's an unusual thing for me to not be able to logic, even when I started working for Jill, to be like, I don't know, this is weird, but I have no fear. Like it's a full trust.
Yeah.
I'm looking at your connection chart right now, and you only have one electromagnetic channel. And basically an electromagnetic channel is when one person has sort of one side and the other person has the other side. And so when you come together, this energy kind of flows really beautifully. And you have it in the channel of awareness, which is like this very individual, unique way of processing information. And so there can also be this element of like, you just mentally are very much on the same page. And you can also, because you're both very open to other people's energy and emotions, I could see where like you can just feel each other's energy, you can feel each other's emotions, and you can feel each other's intent, right? Mm-hmm. So when you can feel another person's intent and it really lines up with yours, I think that's where that almost inexplicable way of trusting another person, it's like it doesn't really have to follow any kind of logic. And neither one of you have the logic in the way that you process information. And so you're like, I don't really care if this makes sense. I just know. Know.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny, like I have definitely had relationships that feel more codependent, that you maybe not in the moment, maybe it is after the fact that you can see like, oh, that wasn't like a healthy codependency. And obviously Jess and I definitely feel each other's fire, not always in the best way of like, over caffeinating or staying out until 3 a.m. because we're both vibing with the world's energy or whatever it is. But yeah, it's I just feel like it's in a very healthy way. And whatever you know, we obviously both have our own like shit and quirks and whatever, but yeah, I don't know. It's very strange. And I don't know if you know this about us or if this like makes the connection for you, and I'll keep it very short and sweet, but you know, we went to grade school together and have known each other for a very long time. And it was always very, not surface level. Obviously, we're always,
but we were acquaintances. We were not
just,
tight
like,
friends.
not in the same friend groups. And then when I started this business, you know, we'd always followed each other on social media and been like supportive from afar kind of thing for us each doing our own things. And immediately when I needed to hire someone, I told my husband, I'm like, I'm hiring Jess and she's going to work with me. And my husband's like, when's the last time you fucking talked to this girl? And I was like, it doesn't matter. Like, I don't know. I just know. And I remember I called Jess and she was like, I don't really want to do this full time. And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. And obviously like 60 days in, if that might even be a stretch. It was just like, instant from there, no turning back. We both were like, all walls down, we're good. We do check in with each other sometimes, like, are you good? Are we here? Are we here? Are we connecting correctly? Okay, we're good. But it's just very bizarre. Like, it had been, I don't even know how many years since Jess and I had last actually spoken between then and like, will you please do this with me?
Probably like, yeah, like maybe a summer after high school or something, or like
8 years
before
maybe,
you ever had
something.
Mason. Yeah.
So it's very weird, just all of it. And then it was just 2021. That was it. And I don't know. It's been this very strange dynamic ever since.
I mean, it makes sense because you are splenic, like you have those instincts, and you're a splenic projector. So the way that you move, the way that you operate in the world is very much based on like your instincts, things that you cannot explain with words. And that's how you know that it's a splenic knowing, is when you can't explain it with words. So I always use this example of like, you know, maybe you go to a restaurant and you've had plans to go to this restaurant for like a month. You have reservations, you have a whole group of friends going, and you get there and you step in and you are just like, no. And you cannot explain why. You're just like, no, absolutely not. And, you know, if you trust it, like you might find like you all leave and then you might find out later, like that restaurant like burns down that night, or like everyone gets food poisoning and you're just like, oh my God, I knew it. But it's tough because it's like, it's hard to explain. And so if you haven't built self-trust, which is an issue a lot of times for people who have splenic authority, is they have been conditioned not to trust their own instincts for safety, for survival, for health, for vitality.
I told you when I talked to Krystal, I was like, I'm pretty sure
this is wild. I mean, so like Jill always, I'm like, this is your superpower. Like trusting your instincts is your superpower, because you know when to take leaps, and she has no fear when she's like, nope, this is the right thing. But I think she has so much like life baggage, trauma, that I think she questions herself way too much. It's nice for somebody else to tell her like, dude, this is a gift, like use it.
But I do, and I'll feel it and I'll go with it. And then after, like, I go with that intuition, but then I start to second guess once I'm in it. And I'm like, oh my God, did I fuck up? Was I too impulsive? I called Jess and she's like, this was your gut instinct. And I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't know. What if I didn't do this right? And obviously, like, I always joke that like whatever I have fucked up in life, I've made it this far. Like I still don't know what I'm doing. People are like, how do you do this? How do you do this? And people have asked me to be a business coach. And I'm like, I don't have tangible anything to give you. All I can do is say, I should be a consultant because you tell me all of this stuff. And I'm like, do this, 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 and this. Don't ask me why. You're asking for my opinion. Like I tell people that's why I can't be a business coach, because I can't give you any logic. I can totally tell you what to do. I just can't tell you why. That's it.
But I think even just knowing that about yourself is really powerful, because a lot of people will try to force themselves to do it. And they will try to force themselves to be a coach when they are like, where you're saying I'm not a coach. And another thing for you, Jill, is that you're a 4-6 profile, and the 6 for the first 30 years, you are really just like learning through trial and error. And so like you came here to earth with this knowing, this wisdom that like doesn't make sense. So like usually people who have a 6 in their profile, like even as children, adults tend to have higher expectations of them because you almost feel like this old soul. You almost feel like you're a wise little child. And so what you're doing in those first 30 years is you are grounding this knowing that you have about the way that the world is supposed to be, the way that the world is supposed to work. It's like you just know and you just understand the way it's supposed to work. but you don't know how or why. And so those first 30 years, you're like figuring it out by messing up, by learning things the hard way, by trying out a lot of different stuff. And what can happen is that if you internalize that as failure or screwing up or making mistakes, then that's where you lose that self-trust. But you really are on the right path. And then from age 30 to 50-ish is when you're really integrating all of that. So you're in a phase right now where you're integrating all of these lessons that you've learned the hard way. Like, typically, people who have a 6 in their profile, it's like after 30 is when they meet the person that they're going to settle down with, and they find the location that they're going to live, and they put down roots, and they, find the career that they're going to stick with for once, because they've probably tried a few, right? And so you're really integrating, and we call it going on the roof in human design. And so you're basically like taking this bird's eye perspective of your life, and you're zooming out, and you're like, okay, after everything that I've learned, what does this mean about life? Like, how do I actually apply this to my own life? Right.
Totally.
And then as you get closer to 50, and even now, like you always have it, but as you get closer to 50, you really start to your trust is so clear. Your trust in yourself and in life is so clear that you really have this ability to be a living example of the way things are supposed to be. Like, you just are able to advise. And it sounds like you already do that, but it comes from this place of like deep, deep embodiment of knowing. You're like, I know, because not only do I know, but I've learned the hard way, and I've learned the lessons, and I've integrated the lessons. And so I'm able to speak to you from a place of deep knowing and embodiment, and people can feel and sense that. So you become what we call like the exemplary human, the role model human, because you are sort of like, you're like, I just know what life is supposed to be like. And I know what's best for everyone.
It's funny because my sister, Jessica, and my husband are all why people, but why, but why, but why? And I'm like, I don't fucking know, dude. You just asked me for my opinion, and I gave it to you.
Yeah. That makes sense, because Jess has that defined head and Ajna, and she's like, no, I need answers. I need answers. I need answers. I need answers. And you're just like, I will not have them, because you don't have that. Like, all of your knowing comes from deep down within your body, not from your mind.
It's very interesting how different we are in that regard with the way that we like store that and share it.
Right. Like, I have to logically process everything.
Yeah. And I'm just like, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, because you're a self-projected projector, whereas Jill is sort of this energy projector. And there's a huge difference. There are all these different kinds of projectors. So it's so funny when you look at content on human design, it's like, oh, you're a projector, this. And I'm like, okay, like for some projectors, yeah, but not all projectors. You operate so differently. Yeah.
That's interesting, especially because you said it is like a smaller population of people too.
Yeah. I mean, especially self-projected projectors are just super rare. And, for you, like your environment is really important too, especially because you have that wide open spleen. Like, a lot of the centers that you have open, you're so easily influenced by like what other people want and their own like health and their wellness and their emotions. It's just like, you have to have this sanctuary for yourself. And another theme for you too, Jess, is like, you want to actually express your knowing, and you want to express who you are in a creative way as well. It's like the way that you live your life is going to be different from the way that other people live their lives. And there isn't an explanation for that. And I could see how you could maybe get caught up in a loop of trying to explain yourself, but there's just no need. There's just no need to explain yourself and the way that you live your life. Like, you are here to be different for sure. Like, in a lot of ways, not that you aren't Jill, but it is a major theme for your life, Jess, of like being able to express who you are through everything that you do and the way that you live your life. And
unapologetically though.
Unapologetically, and like really, like I would say over explaining, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but is over explaining one of your big kind of
Like,
I actually tell her this.
Yeah. So Jill, one of the things that like the first time we really hung out in person after I started working for her, she like took me inside and was like, dude, no is a complete sentence. Like, you do not need to explain why. You're allowed to not want to do something, or you don't have to worry what that person's going to think or if you're going to hurt their feelings or whatever. Like, no is a complete sentence.
Yeah.
She'll send me a screenshot of a text and I'm like, stop, just say, no, thank you. I don't want it. I don't want to go. Why do you have to tell anyone anything? You can say, I don't want to go because I don't like your fucking shoelaces. It really doesn't matter. Just no, that's it.
Yeah. And that's a huge energy waster too. Like that, if you are feeling tired or depleted, and especially now, we have a big full moon tomorrow that, this is amazing.
Talk to you every morning.
Yeah.
No, that's why people hire you.
This is a major theme for right now too, of like over explaining and like providing way too many details. And when that happens, like your message is completely convoluted and complicated. And then it also opens the door for people to argue. And you're just like, you can't argue. This is my truth. And so, yeah, like really, it's so funny. The Olsen twins, I remember, like, I always see this video, you know, Mary Kate and Ashley Olsen. I don't know if you guys were big fans, but I totally was. And there's this interview that they did for a late show. And they basically said, like, one of the things that allowed them to be so successful from such an early age was that they have this motto, no is a complete sentence. And so like they would be pressured to do all these things. And like, even as children, they would just say no and no explanation. And I always think of that, especially for projectors. I would say, especially for a self-projected projector, because you love to talk too. It's like, let me just talk. Let me explain. But that's not the best use of your energy whatsoever.
Well, then she ends up with like foot and mouth syndrome after, and she's backpedaling. And did I screw this up? And did I say too much? And I was like, this.
You're like, yes, you did.
Don't say all of that.
I think
she needs the permission though, because she'll say it, and I'm like, just say no, and she'll do it, and she'll be like, oh my god, I feel so much better. I'm like, this is why you don't have to explain. So
Exactly.
this is my takeaway for Jessica, is that I'm glad that you said that, because I want her to know that she does not have to explain herself to anybody.
Yeah, you probably have a lot more energy if you cut that shit out.
Okay, so take naps, go to bed, and you don't have to cut your caffeine. Just stop explaining yourself, and we will
give less. Do less. Say less.
Do less. Say less.
I think say less. My husband might hire you for me, honestly, for regular sessions here.
Have him hit me up.
Like, keep telling her this.
He is like the polar opposite of me in terms of just like stable, consistent, grounded.
Yeah.
He does not say things unless he's really thought it through. Very opposite in that way, where I'm like, well, we could just talk it out and then we'll solve it. And
I feel like
that's not always effective
until prompted. He's
Oh,
and Anthony's similar in that they just observe the room, and if somebody turns and asks a question, they're like, yeah, they're enthusiastic and whatever. But Jess and I, obviously, Krystal, I mean, you saw how I am in a group environment. We're just like, what's everyone doing? And they like observe and they look around and they're like scoping out the scene. And Jess and I are already in the pool and doing cartwheels and whatever else.
Yeah, because generators are here to respond. So they're waiting to respond. They are waiting to respond to something. So they're not designed to be the conversation starters. They're not designed to be the ones who initiate anything at all. And so not that projectors are either, but because you can see where energy is and where it needs to go and you know how to guide, it's like you can sort of be the one who provides the invitation that they can respond to. And so, yeah, I love looking at dynamics like that too, like looking at the generator projector dynamic or even the projector manifestor dynamic. I was telling Jill is my favorite because, and I am a manifestor. And we're only 8 to 9% of the population, and manifestors are the most misunderstood of all the types. And we have these sort of like closed, repelling auras. And so projectors, because you have this penetrating aura that sees right through people, it's like you have this ability to understand manifestors in a way that other people don't. And so I love that dynamic too. It's just like, you know, I feel most seen by projectors times 100. And I love that.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to wrap this up. This was so fun and so helpful. I feel like we could just suck up all your energy all day, every day, forever with this because it's so fun. But
give us like a conclusion. Give us a wrap up of like, again, like where we can find you, what tools you can provide anybody that's listening. For our clients, this is our special surprise coming at some point within our Fueled community for something special, which is cool. But tell us, for all of these listeners, like where they can find you and what you can give them that you just gave us plenty of today.
Yeah, definitely come to Instagram. Follow me on Instagram. There's a lot of content on Instagram that's super helpful. I also have a YouTube and I have a podcast. Like, you can learn so much just from all of that. I have something coming out called the Alignment Audit. It's sort of like a quiz that you take to figure out, where are you out of alignment with your human design, which of your centers, or is it your type or your authority, which is your decision-making mechanism. So if you understand where you're out of alignment, I'm going to be launching a membership subscription where you can access all of the tools that I use with my clients to help them come back into alignment. So it's a lot of somatic practices, like tapping, also meditation and subliminal audios and journal prompts, and these monthly challenges that we sync up with the lunar cycle. So it's going to be a really cool community. I've been building it for a while and it's almost ready. So you can come and check me out there.
Sign me up.
I know. She told me, and I was like, whatever you're selling, I'm in. Her posts on Instagram, when you guys go follow her, I'll make sure I tag all of her stuff in the notes. But she has those posts that's like, oh my God, that's me. Like, there was something you made for Halloween that I just thought was hysterical, that I was swiping through and showing my husband. And normally he would have been rolling in his eyes, and this time he was like, this is actually really funny now that I like know and understand it. So thank you so much. This was so much fun, truly. Hopefully everyone else has as much fun with this as Jess and I did, because I think that was hysterical. So thank you. We will tag all the things so everyone can find you. And that's all. Thanks, Krystal. And thanks
Thank
everyone
you.
for listening.
Thank you for having me. Thank you to the listeners. Bye.